If you're looking forward to the upcoming remake of Resident Evil 3 but don't want to wait until April, then let me introduce you to the new game Heaven Dust. This is a fun yet familiar spin on the survival horror genre that traps a lone survivor in a mansion and pits him up against a bunch of flesh-eating zombies. Yeah, it may not be very original, but this is easily the most adorable Resident Evil clone you're ever gonna see. This is the story of a lone survivor who is stuck in a mansion with a bunch of zombies. He's a little confused at first, but it seems that a rare virus has turned everybody into flesh-eating monsters, and he needs to escape before he becomes dinner. He'll do this by picking up items, solving puzzles, and cracking every last door lock in the game, all while picking up notes that help to fill out the story. It won't take long for our nameless hero to discover that he's not stuck in any old mansion, or rather a massive science lab that may in fact be responsible for this mess. Now, as you may have noticed, this is an all too familiar setup for a survival horror game. It doesn't stop there, with almost every part of Heaven Dust playing out in predictable fashion. You'll recognize all the cliches, and if you listen carefully, you can even hear the faint sound of scribbling as the developers go down the horror checklist. Zombies will attack out of nowhere, there's limited ammo, green herbs are good for health, there's a magical chest and safe rooms, you gotta mind the limited inventory space, etc, etc, etc. It's like eating a big spoonful of comfort food. What sets this game apart is the presentation, which is both slightly overhead and kind of adorable. I'm not saying this game is for younger players, but it often feels like Resident Evil kids. Our hero and the zombies have a cutesy look that is a lot more charming than scary. It's an odd juxtaposition since the story remains deadly serious and the backgrounds aren't that far off from what you would get in a gorier horror game. The character design suggests a goofier take on the genre, but that's definitely not the case. One thing that I really like about Heaven Dust is the way they get around the problem of limited ammo. This is still a game where every bullet counts, but I found that I could still play aggressively and not be left helpless. Now, it does help that you can collect randomly placed bullet shells and combine them with the gunpowder that you can find at every vending machine. And since you get tokens for killing many of the zombies, there's an incentive to keep shooting down the bad guys and buying more stuff. I also really like the gameplay. It may not seem like a big deal at first, but seeing the mansion from an overhead perspective makes getting around a lot easier. It allows you to look into areas you haven't opened up yet and navigate through the labyrinth of rooms with relative ease. Better still, the combat is as easy as targeting a zombie and shooting it a few times. You don't have to worry about aiming or headshots or any of that. Just lock on and shoot. I gotta say, the developers have done a great job of streamlining so much of the survival horror experience. But here's the question. Is it scary? The sad fact is that nothing about this game is frightening. The cartoony characters blend any fear you might have had, and there's never a twist or a moment or anything that even makes an attempt to be terrifying. The scariest part of Heaven Dust is just trying to avoid zombies in a narrow hallway, but that's hardly an issue when you get loaded up on ammo. This is one of those times where the overhead perspective actually works against the horror. It's simply not as scary when you can see all the zombies coming in every direction. Part of what made Resident Evil so effective is because hellhounds could burst through a window at any time, and zombies could be around any of the corners. But there's nothing like that here. I'm also not a big fan of the puzzles found in Heaven Dust. A good chunk of that involves you reading notes and using the clues to crack a 3-digit code. These are fine in theory, but the game relies too much on them. Relying on diary entries, emails, and notes to clue you into the puzzles has always felt like a crutch to me. And it's especially annoying when the writing is middling at best. The game is at its best when you're picking up items and lugging batteries and levers around the mansion in order to manually move puzzle pieces. The only thing worse than having to solve another one of those 3-digit door codes is getting stuck behind a box you've been pushing, which I hate to say it, happens a lot more than you might expect. On one hand, Heaven Dust scratches the survival horror itch by marking off all of the cliches you know and love. It's full of zombies, puzzles, items, and virus intrigue. That said, it's never scary, and the story doesn't do enough to stand out from the countless other games where you're stuck in a mansion. The cutesy look is at odds with the story and the tone, and I never want to hunt through a bunch of notes ever again to solve a 3-digit door code. Yeah, you've seen and done this all before, but Heaven Dust is an enjoyable survival horror game that is a great alternative for people too scared to play Resident Evil. Hey, thanks for watching our review. If you liked what you saw here, then you should know that we post new reviews and features almost every day. Now here's the question I have for you. What non-horror game should have been scarier? Or perhaps I should ask, what non-horror game would you like to see turned into a scary game? Either way, I'm excited to see what you come up with in the comments below. In other news, we'll be back shortly with a review of Panda Ball, Conglomerate 451, Theme Park Simulator, and more. A whole lot more. If that sounds good to you, then I strongly recommend you click that subscribe button and support what we're doing here. Until then.